It is 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story this hour. The wife of a Northern Ireland police officer says they are living in fear after a critical incident is declared over a data breach involving 10,000 people.
Ultimately, in my opinion, they've failed in their duty of care here in relation to keeping their employees safe.
Also tonight, 41 people lose their lives after their boat capsizes off the Italian island of Lampedusa, with tens of thousands of people attempting to make illegal crossings to Italy this year alone. A Royal Marine calls for an investigation into West Yorkshire Police after an alleged attempt to have him dismissed from the armed forces.
This could have been taken away in the blink of an eye, simply from a police officer writing that email.
Six people are confirmed dead in Hawaii as wildfires rage out of control on the island of Maui. We'll be taking a look at the use of artificial intelligence in music after reports that Google and major music labels are in talks to license artists' voices for AI-generated songs. And of course, we'll be taking a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in the press preview from past. Evening all. The wife of a Northern Ireland police officer has told Sky News that her family are living in fear and checking under their cars every morning for any suspicious devices. Speaking to Sky News, the woman was angry about a data breach which released the names and ranks of an estimated 10,000 serving police officers and staff. With the terror threat in Northern Ireland at severe, which means that attacks are highly likely, the Police Federation has called the data breach monumental. And tonight, the police service has said it is investigating another data breach, this time relating to stolen documents and a laptop. Sky's senior Ireland correspondent, David Blevins, has our first report.
Living in the shadows.
It's just total disbelief.
The wife of a serving police officer says she fears for her family. She spoke to me anonymously. Her husband's name was among those mistakenly published.
I was so shocked at what I was hearing and reading, and quite frankly, really angry. And ultimately, in my opinion, they've failed in their duty of care here in relation to keeping their employees safe.
Police officers here have always lived under the threat of violence. What does that mean in terms of how you go about your daily life?
Daily life for us. Every morning before my husband leaves for work, before I leave for work, we both check under our cars in case of any suspicious devices, and we vary our routes to work on a daily basis. And we basically don't talk about what my husband does to anybody who's outside our family or our immediate circle of trust.
The attempted murder of a police officer earlier this year highlighted the danger. The threat posed by renegade factions like the new IRA, now deemed severe. It's a security nightmare.
Clearly, we have officers who are working in very sensitive roles in policing, and they are particularly feeling vulnerable about what has happened or are worried. This is serious. And the organisation are treating this seriously by calling this as a critical incident, because that's what it is. I mean, we're talking about life and death here, and that's not to sensationalise.
The Police Service of Northern Ireland was responding to a Freedom of Information request. It inadvertently attached a spreadsheet of names and ranks, restricted information, and it was published online.
I think that this level of breach is really unprecedented. There are also many officers who essentially overnight will have found themselves outed to friends and family as police officers, which, given the severe security situation that we face in Northern Ireland, is an incredibly difficult thing for families to come to terms with.
The Chief Constable has cut short his holiday. News of a second data breach compromising 200 staff last month piles the pressure on him. Officers and their families want answers.
We also have 2 young children to protect. And there are still people out there who deem the police officers and their families as legitimate targets. So it just adds a further element of fear to our daily life.
So you're living in fear?
Effectively, yes, we are.
The human cost of a monumental human error.
And David joins us now live from Belfast. David, I mean, as you mentioned in your report, police officers working in Northern Ireland have always existed under that cloud. So just how frightened should police officers be tonight as a result of not one, but 2 significant data breaches?
Frightened enough for the Chief Constable to have returned from holiday to Northern Ireland for an emergency meeting of the policing board. Simon Byrne knows the dangers his officers and staff now face. 302 police officers were murdered during 30 years of conflict here, and the peace process never completely eliminated the threat. Dissident Republicans still pursuing Irish unity by violent means have killed 2 police officers and attempted to kill many more. That's what prompted MI5 to raise the terror threat level in Northern Ireland back to severe, meaning attacks are highly likely. Now, if you're being told that those who regard you as a legitimate target are planning attacks and that they just may have your name, checking under your car for bombs and varying your route to work are very necessary precautions.
David, many thanks. 41 people are believed to have drowned after their boat capsized off the coast of Tunisia. The 4 who survived claim that the people on board were thrown into the sea after a large wave flipped the vessel. Well, tonight, Médecins Sans Frontières has warned that tragedies like these are happening daily in the area. 89,047 people have attempted to cross via the Mediterranean route in the first 7 months of this year. On this route alone, 2,063 migrants were declared dead or missing, taking the total of those reported dead or missing to 27,812 since 2014. Sky's Europe correspondent Adam Parsons reports.
If you could support these people, possibly taking them on board and giving them water and food.
From the air, it's just a tiny speck in a giant sea, but that is a boat with 4 people in it, the only survivors of yet another tragedy in the Mediterranean. They were spotted by a plane and rescued by a freighter, but this is not really a happy story. Last week, their original overloaded boat sank. These 4 people floated in the sea and then somehow found an empty boat. But more than 40 other passengers who were with them are all presumed dead. Their target was the Italian island of Lampedusa, a magnet for those seeking asylum like these people. Leaving North Africa, it's a tempting route that has now claimed yet more lives.
They say there were 45 people with them, 3 children. They say they managed to save themselves by using lifebuoys made from the tyre tubes. They say that they fell in the water and they were together, but little by little they lost track of each other.
This was the scene near Lampedusa just a few days ago, another migrant rescue, this time among rolling waves. It is very hard to know just how many boats have sunk in these heavy, perilous waters. But still they come. Abandoned boats are a common sight here, but so are those carrying migrants. And why? Well, Lampedusa may be a small island a long way from anywhere, but it's Italian. Reach here and you're in the European Union. That's what attracts people, as I saw a couple of months ago, joining a rescue of more than 600 people out in the Mediterranean, all of them wanting to get to Italy and to Europe. The charities who rescue these people say the numbers just keep growing and that governments are not doing enough to help.
From my perspective, if we are talking about this crisis being so huge, the crisis is not about the arrivals, but the crisis is that the whole system of search and rescue is not working anymore, on purpose not working anymore.
So this is a picture of desperation. Thousands have died in these waters. Beneath the waves, the Mediterranean is a graveyard. Adam Parsons, Sky News.
And, of course, the disaster in Italy has also fed into the ongoing row back here in the UK of what to do about people crossing the Channel in small boats. The former Home Secretary, former Shadow Home Secretary Diane Abbott, tweeted a link to the story with the caption, "These migrants have indeed effed off to the bottom of the sea." Her tweet has since been deleted. Our political correspondent, Mary Aurora, joins us now. And Mary, of course, I understand what Diane Abbott was referring to there, of course, the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, Lee Anderson, telling people who didn't like the barge to F off back to France. But if you're going to complain about him using that sort of language, I'm not sure that perhaps she should have been using it.
Well, exactly, Neil, and that's really the difficulty, isn't it, for Diane Abbott this evening, is by trying to potentially call out Lee Anderson, she's ended up actually making herself look worse, hence why she presumably deleted that tweet when it was obviously seen as very much in bad taste and very much out of place. I mean, this is a really contentious subject on both sides of the House. I think Labour will be breathing a sigh of relief this evening that she is no longer a Labour MP, and therefore they don't have to excuse or talk about this at all. They can completely say it's nothing to do with them. But the real issue is this is stemming from Lee Anderson's comments around migrants and also his comments around government failure on immigration policy. And this week, with it being Small Boats Week, the Prime Minister is going to want really to be talking about policy successes and new policy that they are outlining to try and tackle the small boats crisis, rather than controversies around Diane Abbott that have led to from Lee Anderson comments. Now, we know that Brendan Clark-Smith, Tory MP, called out those comments from Diane Abbott and said it was essentially capitalising on human misery for political gain. And also CCHQ this evening have said that they endorse Brendan Clark-Smith's criticism of Diane Abbott as well. But will that have cut through when Diane Abbott is no longer a Labour MP? We'll have to see. She is associated with the Labour Party, but she is no longer a member of the Labour Party.
Mary, thank you. A serving Royal Marine who won a historic defamation case against West Yorkshire Police is now calling for the independent police watchdog to investigate. The force issued an apology at the High Court in June over an alleged attempt to have him dismissed from the armed forces. Sky's chief North of England correspondent Greg Milam reports.
It's taken a hell of a lot of hard work and determination and a certain mindset to be able to get to where I am in my career. And this could have been taken away in the blink of an eye, simply from a police officer writing that email.
This is that email sent to the Royal Marines accusing that serviceman of threats and blatant lies, calling for an internal investigation, saying his behaviour was far below the standard expected of a member of the armed forces, sent when police hadn't even spoken to him about allegations made by his former partner. His words are spoken by an actor.
So you can imagine when you're receiving an email like this from your employers that's been sent by a police officer, which was effectively stating that I had committed 2 very serious criminal offences against my former partner. You can imagine the panic, the real emotional and psychological effect that would have on anybody that's already going through really tough family court proceedings.
In June, West Yorkshire Police issued an apology at the High Court, becoming the first force to be found to have committed the highest level of defamation. The Marine can't be identified for legal reasons. He now wants the Independent Office for Police Conduct to look into the whole investigation, including why he spent more than a year on police bail before this case was dropped.
I would 100% say that there was a racial element to this as well. I do not believe that if I was the equivalent white person in my position, I would have been dealt with in the same way. My experience of racism and institutional racism in particular has really been heightened due to what I've suffered with the hands of the West Yorkshire Police.
In a statement, the force said, "We are aware of the circumstances of the case and have previously been engaged with the complainant. We have no further comment to make on the matter." The IOPC said, on receiving and recording a complaint, forces are required to consider whether it meets the mandatory criteria set out in law for a referral to the IOPC. We then carefully assess all referrals to determine whether an investigation may be required, and if so, who should carry this out. But like so many cases in recent months, this has shaken faith in police.
There are many good police officers out there, and I'm sure that they've got a really tough job. However, when you are in the wrong, you should be dealt with appropriately.
Greg Milam, Sky News.
Wildfires have destroyed large parts of a town in Maui, an island in the Hawaiian archipelago. Authorities have said that 3 fires were fuelled by windy conditions and so far have killed 6 people. Sky's US correspondent James Matthews reports.
It is an unprecedented scene here. The blaze, fanned by Category 4 Hurricane Dora, has spread across Hawaii's Big Island and the holiday island of Maui. This tourist destination is home to more than 160,000 people. Fast-moving, unpredictable flames have consumed hundreds of acres. Structures have been damaged, homes destroyed, and a population evacuated. People have had to jump into the ocean to escape the fire, and there have been fatalities.
It was confirmed we've had 6 fatalities that we were able to confirm, and we are still in a search and rescue mode, and so I don't know what will happen to that number.
Evacuation and rescue efforts have been hampered by damage to communications. Mobile phone towers have been brought down by the fire. The 911 emergency service is disconnected across a wide area. Residents have complained they were not notified in advance of the spread of the fire. There are reports of people running down streets screaming as they were caught close to the blaze. The main airport on the island of Maui remains open, but it now doubles as a shelter for 2,000 people evacuated from their homes. The hurricane winds fanning the flames have combined with recent near-drought conditions in parts of Hawaii to enable the fires to accelerate. Casualties, including burn victims, have been flown to nearby Honolulu for treatment. It is a deteriorating, dangerous situation. James Matthews, Sky News.
Now, the Chinese economy is showing the first signs of slipping into deflation as the country struggles in the wake of the COVID pandemic. Western economists are now watching and waiting to see what the impact of the plummeting prices there will mean around the world. We'll have more on the wider impact in just a moment. But first, our Asia correspondent Helen Ann Smith reports from Beijing.
As dawn breaks in Beijing, the workers wait. Gathering on a dusty street corner, these men are casual labourers, hoping to land a day's work. Companies, usually construction, come advertising their needs. The lucky are loaded on buses, but there's not always enough to go round. Multiple people we met here told us that since the pandemic, opportunities are fewer.
Yes.
Mr. Feng is one of them. No, I don't get picked up every day, he says. There's about a 60% chance. Of course I'm worried, he says. But we're in the society now and you can't do anything about it, right? You just have to move forward. That dip in work is just one sign that the Chinese economy is now not in the best health. Indeed, while most of the world battles inflation, in July, prices here actually fell. And while that might sound like good news, you only need to come here, to Beijing's antiques market, to see how it hurts. In fact, long-term deflation erodes profits and leads to job losses. Traders here tell us customers just aren't spending.
This is an antique market, so people buy things when they feel it's necessary and don't when it's not. Compared to pre-pandemic, people are less willing to buy. They are reluctant. They think twice. Everything needs money.
The causes are multiple and complex. A decade of overbuilding and producing, and then months of this. Zero COVID excesses, hard lockdowns that closed businesses, depleted savings and crushed confidence. The scars of what this country endured during the pandemic are still everywhere here, and the lasting damage is arguably now the biggest challenge for the Chinese government. Economic success has always been such a key pillar of legitimacy for this one-party system. But if deflation did take hold in a more long-lasting way, the pain would be felt far beyond here. And that's because of China's vast global trade. Deflation here would mean reduced demand for foreign imports. Experts say it could be the start of a general slowing.
I don't think there will be a very large-scale financial crisis like what the United States 2008. I think the overall impact will be wider, but not that intense.
Long-term deflation is not written up as a certainty. Various signs point to it being a temporary blip. But but it does herald more uncertainty in an economy that once seemed unstoppable. Helen Ann Smith, Sky News, Beijing.
So, with prices falling in China, what could this mean for the global economy? Our business correspondent Gurpreet Narwan has this analysis.
The world's second largest economy is facing the spectre of deflation. The consumer prices index, that's this chart behind me, slipped into negative territory in July. It means prices actually fell for the first time since early 2021. Back then, it was a collapse in pork prices that fueled deflation. This time, things are a little more serious, as a slowdown in domestic and global demand is depressing prices. Now, it may seem like a remote concern to countries like the UK, which are battling against the opposite problem, prices that are rising too quickly. But China is a major exporter to the rest of the world, and here in Britain, we count China as our largest import partner for goods. So if sustained, deflation in China could ripple through to the rest of the world, meaning cheaper imports for consumers. And predominantly, it's things like office machinery, tech and electronics that we're buying from China. These could become cheaper, and that should, in theory, help to keep inflation in check. But it's unlikely to make a massive dent in the UK's inflation problem. Here in Britain, it's food prices that are the major concern. The effects of the energy crisis are also still working their way through the economy. So a fall in the price of Chinese imports won't solve our problems. And while it may offer some support, a sustained period of deflation could create far bigger problems than it solves, because it could cause Chinese consumers and businesses to delay spending, and that's worrying for UK exporters.
Prior to the pandemic, the Chinese market was a very rapidly growing market for the UK. But now, with the Chinese economy growing at a pace of about 5% per year, the outlook, I think, in terms of UK exports to China is for a more muted expansion, although it's still, I think, a positive market.
Potentially bad news for global growth too, which has relied on China. As you can see here, economic growth in China has been racing ahead of other major economies for decades. So a slowdown in the second largest economy will have an outsized impact on global trade, consumption and commodity prices. In short, it will have ramifications for all of us.
Gurpreet Narwan there. A British man is among 5 people who've been killed during protests in South Africa. Officials say the 40-year-old, who was reportedly a doctor on holiday in the country, was killed in Cape Town last Thursday. It's believed he'd taken a wrong turn from a nearby airport when a group approached the vehicle and shot him. The FBI have shot and killed a man suspected of making threats against Joe Biden. Agents say they were carrying out a search warrant on the home of Craig Robertson in Utah when the shooting happened. The broadcaster and comedian Hardeep Singh Kohli has been charged in connection with sex offence allegations. Police Scotland say the claims aren't recent, but didn't give further details. The 54-year-old, who appeared on Celebrity Big Brother in 2018, has been released and is due to appear in court at a later date. It's been reported that Google is in talks with major music labels to license artists' voices and tunes for AI-generated songs. The rise of artificial intelligence has led to a surge in deep-fake songs that can pretty convincingly mimic artists, often without their consent. Our business correspondent Paul Kelso has more.
In their home studio in North London, brothers Lewis and Michael create content for millions of social media followers.
I couldn't tell you what I've been up to this month.
Lewis's vocals could be transformed into something that's supposed to sound like one of the biggest stars in the world.
Then switch it.
Tell you what I've been up to this month.
It's an Ed Sheeran song.
I couldn't tell you what I'm doing in this club.
You'd be hard-pressed to tell the difference, right?
Oh, yeah.
And if the artist doesn't mind people using their voices, then they don't have to really move a muscle. You don't have to get out of bed. At least the next track. Yeah.
I guess that's what the music companies are counting on the platforms that they can reach a deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, instead of getting sent song demos with other people's vocals, they just get sent song demos with their vocal and they go, yep, release it.
Altego haven't released this track on any platform, but it demonstrates how convincingly AI can replicate established artists.
I'm a Barbie girl.
AI versions of singers from Johnny Cash to Drake have left the music industry scrambling to keep up with technology once more. Universal and Warner Music are reportedly in negotiations with Google over licensing the melodies and voices of stars in an attempt to monetize the biggest threat to the industry since streaming.
We could create collective bargaining for music rights, or we could do what the US Copyright Office has said we should do, which is acknowledge that copyrights are things we give to humans, not algorithms. And we could just say, look, you can sample and train models with creators' work, and you can make new works with it, but you don't get a copyright in it. And one thing we know about our bosses is that as much as they hate paying us, they hate not having copyright even more.
UK-based company VoiceSwap is already licensing artists' voices for use in AI projects, with singers sharing revenue generated from subscribers.
So we do literally a 50-50 gross deal, so it's probably the fairest deal in the music industry. And I think that aside from the fact that artists aren't being paid in line with the reduction in costs that, you know, big tech is enjoying, with like the price of compute coming down and all that kind of stuff, I think there's also an opportunity here to look at the way that we champion music.
AI is creating opportunities and challenges for musicians, as well as a legal and ethical minefield. In future, telling real from fake may only get harder. Paul Kelso, Sky News.
And that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll be taking our first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, I'm joined by the Daily Mirror's Associate Editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Telegraph's Deputy Comment Editor, Annabel Denham. And we will be talking about this story on the front of the Eye. Their headline, new talks on tented camp for migrants in Essex amid Tory splits on crackdown. Long headline today. All that after this. In just a moment, of course, we have the press preview, our first look at the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories this hour. And the 10,000 Northern Ireland police officers who've had their details leaked in a data breach are now receiving security advice. At least 6 people have been killed in wildfires on the Hawaiian island of Maui. At least 24 others were injured, with some residents forced to jump into the ocean to escape the flames. And a serving Royal Marine who won a historic defamation case against West Yorkshire Police has called for the independent police watchdog to investigate the force over the case. Check your watches. It is, of course, time for the press preview, our first look at the front pages as they arrive. Let's see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Telegraph's deputy comment editor, Annabel Denham. They will be with us from now until just before midnight. But before we turn to them, let's turn our attention to the front pages, and we begin with the Belfast Telegraph. It, of course, leading on the PSNI's chief constable being set to attend an emergency meeting of the Northern Ireland Policing Board following a data breach. Well, 2 now, in fact. The Eye understands that tents bought by the Home Secretary to house thousands of asylum seekers could soon be put up at RAF Wethersfield. And the front of the Express also looking at the government's migration policies. Their headline, Threat to Quit Rights Treaty if Rwanda blocked again. A different story for the Mail. They're taking a look at mortgage rates. Their headline, Have we finally turned the corner on mortgage misery? The cost of living crisis forcing the student COVID generation to live at home. That's the front of The Guardian. It's reporting that 1 in 3 school leavers may choose to study locally. According to the FT, Chinese technology firms are competing to buy $5 billion worth of high-performance computer chips that they believe will help them get ahead of the curve on artificial intelligence. And the Metro is reporting on comedian and presenter Hardeep Singh Kohli being arrested and charged with non-recent sexual offences. Just a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages whilst watching us discuss them. Technology, it's fantastic, isn't it? And we are joined tonight, as mentioned, by Kevin Maguire and Annabel Denham. Lovely to see you both. And I think an appropriate place to start this evening, Annabel, will be on the front of the Belfast Telegraph. We were covering this story last night when there was but one significant data breach. And perhaps I think I maybe misspoke. It appeared initially, because of the detail that was let out, not the addresses, but just some bare detail, that perhaps this wasn't incredibly serious. The fact the Chief Constable is running back to deal with this, I would suggest otherwise.
That's absolutely right. It's hard to conceive of a more serious breach. And cover the Belfast Telegraph talking about the Chief Constable flying back into this storm today. I think there's going to be immense pressure on him, an expectation that some heads are going to roll. But really, before we get to that stage, there are so many questions that need to be answered about how this information could possibly have found its way into the public domain. Who was in charge of it? Was this given to a junior member of staff? Why wasn't this data encrypted? You know, all of these sorts of questions that have to be asked in order that we can understand how we now find ourselves in a position where these police officers and their staff are finding themselves potentially in danger, greater danger.
I mean, we've been speaking to the wife of one serving PSNI officer, and it's almost like we're going back to the dark days of the Troubles. They're looking underneath. They're looking underneath their car every morning. I mean, we shouldn't forget the fact. I mean, the terror threat over there is currently rated at severe.
It's only a few months ago that an officer was maimed by dissident Republicans. The threat is still there and real. And, of course, the Freedom of Information request was for the number of officers in each rank. So you'd get a number of sergeants, a number of constables and so on. But somehow somebody has put the names and the initials and the ranks and the location of these officers. Now, if you've got an unusual name or initials, it's not going to be that hard to check you by cross-referencing the electoral register or telephone directories, which can be accessed online. So it's incredibly serious. And, yeah, I mean, Simon Byrne's got to come up with some answers. He's got to come up quick because his job is on the line as Chief Constable. I don't think there's any point sacking him if it wasn't him, or the procedures were actually there and somehow somebody junior didn't follow them. But yeah, there's a talk of £100 million compensation now, illegal claims. But more the point is fearing for your life, because there will be people who are undercover. They won't publicly tell their friends and associates. You might be from a community where you don't want to reveal you're a police officer. So it's as serious as it gets.
I mean, in Northern Ireland, of course, as serious as it gets, but it does look like this came from a freedom of information request.
Yeah,
and on a number of occasions, I mean, both of you, so I'm sure at some point will have, messaged the government department and got back slightly more than you were expecting. But this is on an entirely different.
No, completely. And as Annabelle says, there's loads of questions have to be answered. You've got to stop it happening again, but you've got to understand how it happened and now how you deal with it, because some of the names are said to have already appeared on social media.
And at the moment, we've just been told human error. Well, we're going to, I think, need quite a lot more detail than that.
Yeah.
You're right, it was a freedom of information request for some details on the complement and the numbers of each rank, but certainly they wouldn't have been expecting.
No, I've seen parliamentary questions, written parliamentary questions, in a force. It's basically to see whether you've got too many people at the top and not enough constables, sergeants, detectives, whatever. So it's perfectly legitimate to ask and receive that information. What isn't legitimate at all is the names and the initials, the ranks and the location of individuals.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what their internal investigation ultimately concludes. Kevin, you start us on this one, on the front of the eye. Conservative splits on the crackdown on migrants, perhaps, but there is this new tented camp that I'm sure will provoke just as much discussion as we have had around the barge.
Yeah, it was reported about a fortnight ago that the Home Office was buying tents, and then they were said not to going to be used, but now a local forum near RAF Wethersfield in Essex has been told the tents may be put up. Now, one way it's how you deal with an influx of people and capacity. I don't think if tents were used in the summer for a short period of time, I don't think there's a huge moral principled objection to that. It's rather like the barge. If it's a short-term answer, but it's a sign, really. The Home Office is all over the place on this, because as Lee Anderson, the Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party, said, they failed on this. They failed. He used a lot of his language, got a lot of attention, but what's more significant is the Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party said they have failed, and they have. And they're all over the place now in this question of pulling out the European Convention on Human Rights. If Rwanda is blocked, well, Rwanda's been blocked not on European law, but so far the Court of Appeal has blocked it on UK law.
I mean, Annabelle, are you as surprised as I am that Lee Anderson hasn't had, even just a minor rap over the knuckles for what he has been saying? I can get why they may be rolled in behind the language, but to have the Deputy Chairman of the party stating explicitly that your migration policy has failed, what's he still doing?
It's a Labour election leaflet, isn't it? There we are. Don't listen to us. Listen to the Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party.
I'd like to listen to Annabelle.
You're right. It's extraordinary to have the Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party, who is supposed to be helping campaign, who's supposed to be helping. You've got by-elections coming up, a general election taking place next year. This is one of the key figures in the party who is supposed to be trying to identify ways of appealing to voters. And Rishi Sunak went out at the start of the year and said that he had 5 pledges, one of which was to stop the boats. And 8 months later, we've got this admission from Lee Anderson that it's failing. But what Lee Anderson also said is that they are being thwarted at every turn. And I think a lot of voters are going to have sympathy with that. I know, Kevin, that you won't be one of them, but...
It's appalling. People get lawyers to uphold their rights.
But there's a reason why the government is getting increasingly desperate here with tents and the Ascension Plan, which was actually floated a couple of years ago, but that's now being recycled. They cannot get Rwanda off the ground. And that's because it's simply so difficult within the current parameters. Now, they've managed to get the illegal migration bill through. How they'll implement it, will they be able to implement it, is another question entirely. Like you say, that the Court of Appeal has blocked Rwanda.
They did
appealing to the Supreme Court.
Suella Braverman couldn't say the illegal migration bill is actually legal.
I'm hoping that my director, Amy, can skip forward a story and we can kind of keep talking about the migration theme. On the front of The Guardian, of course, at least 41 feared dead in the Mediterranean again. And the figures since 2014, I think, are approaching 30,000 people that we know of that have died in the Mediterranean. I mean, the simple truth isn't the simple truth that no matter what we do, there are still going to be people who are prepared to risk their lives, as they were doing crossing the Mediterranean, as they're doing every time they cross the Channel. There will always be people who are willing to risk their lives to get to this country.
That's right. And until that stops, then we're not going to be able to end the human trafficking trade. Not going to, until we can stop people from coming here, until we can have some kind of effective deterrence, then we're not going to be able to clamp down on the trade. And unfortunately, this is just going to keep happening. Now, a lot of these people...
What is the deterrent, though? But what is the deterrent when these people clearly know that others have died making this journey, and they still do it? I really struggle when people talk about there being some magical deterrent out there that we just haven't yet identified, because what would deter someone who willingly risks their life?
Well, you somehow have to try, what's the push factor? There's a pull factor. You want to come to make a better life. People come to work. They want to improve themselves. But why are they leaving their countries now? Whether it's war, or whether it's famine, drought, environmental catastrophes, or hardship, they're leaving for better lives. Now, you could make life better for them. We have cut the international aid budget by about $4 billion, but I think that's it. And, you know, it's rather like the climate emergency coming in and patterns. If more people are going to face drought and famine, there's going to be bigger movement of people. So I think, you know, we get very few people coming to Britain compared to the rest of the world. Most people go to neighbouring countries. It's
noticeable if you're living in the parts of the country where they are.
Yeah, but very, very few. Just getting some perspective, you're quite right. If you live in Dover, you'll notice a lot of people coming in. You won't notice it elsewhere. But still, in Britain, we get a small number. But nevertheless, it's got to be dealt with. And I think people will keep on coming and risking their lives if they're facing incredible hardship or terror.
No, and I think that's right. The deterrence really is to tell these asylum seekers they need to get to Britain through safe and legal routes, and the government has clearly got to address what those are and what they look like. And if you don't, then you get sent either back to the country that you originated from, or you'll be sent to Rwanda or possibly Ascension if they're able to get that plan off the ground, and I have my doubts. But until that is made clear, then, of course, people aren't going to stop coming here. And you know, the Home Office have warned that there could be 100 million people across the country.
I think Rwanda's immoral as well as impractical. I think it's about 500 people, the capacity, so it wouldn't really be that big a deterrent. But I think you've got to stop people wanting to leave their homes in their countries for whatever reason.
Let's have a look.
Not easy, I know.
Yeah, incredibly difficult, of course. Let's have a look at the front of the Daily Mail. And Annabelle, according to the headline, some fantastic news. Although you scroll down a little bit and you remember that, you know, mortgage rates are the highest they've been in absolutely ages. People's bills are through the roof. Yet we may have turned the corner, but we're still pretty much in the bad neighbourhood when it comes to mortgages, aren't we?
That's right. We've got a long, long way to go. Of course, the Bank of England recently raised interest rates to 5.25%. That was its 14th consecutive rise since December 2021. It's really struggled to get inflation down. There were fears that it was embedded in the British economy, but the latest set of data showed it had been reduced from, I think, 8.7% to 7.9%. So it does, as you say, feel as though we've turned a corner, and this is in some ways a response to that. It's the expectation now, at last, that inflation is going to come down. And that's what's been so difficult for the Bank of England, is trying to restore its credibility and convince people that it has got this under
way to go, haven't they?
Well, they do, but nonetheless, as you say, it feels as though they have ever so slightly managed to begin to turn the oil tanker around.
I think all that's missing in this propaganda on front of the Daily Mail is saying it's green shoots, which we used to hear all the time before.
But let's not be entirely cynical here. 4 of Britain's largest lenders are cutting the rates. There are a lot of people whose mortgages are renewal.
All right. You say that. Let's have a look. Halifax is cutting the rate. You're right to 5.28. Was it probably 2%? Not very long ago. And you've got to have 40% equity. So there we are. I mean,
all I'm saying
come
is
on.
I'm very much glass half full these days,
Rah,
Kevin,
go
clearly.
Britain.
But also, we did need to have a massive correction. Ever since the global financial crisis, we had ultra-low interest rates, and that had all sorts of perverse consequences. It led to asset bubbles. Look at what's happened in the housing market. People aren't able to get on the housing ladder. It deterred people from saving. And ultimately, we needed to have a massive correction, and it was always going to be painful. And that's what we're experiencing now. And I think the hope has to be that this is the beginning of, as you say, some green shoots, some good news.
Don't use the term. They never germinate, green shoots.
Glass half empty, glass half full. I'm sticking there. Kevin, Annabelle, pause there just for a second, because after the break, we are going to be taking a look at this story, how the so-called COVID generation of students is coping with the cost of living crisis. We'll be right back.
For many people, Harvey is far from over. Christchurch has been changed forever by what happened here.
There was a river of blood coming out of the mosque. That's a scene that you don't forget.
Ida has certainly left its mark on New Orleans.
It just feels heartbreaking.
We help you understand the world with us. We are standing on the supply line right into the heart of America's opioid crisis. I've reported from around the world and around the UK. You trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who've made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Joe Biden knows the celebrations are over, and this is a country in crisis.
You don't want to be remembered this way. You always want to be remembered as something positive.
It is almost impossible to predict where these fires will go next. This gives you an idea of the strength of those winds, strong enough to bend and twist metal.
Do you regret the tweet, Gary?
There's no sign, publicly at least, of either side being willing to give ground. How do you reassure the public that all of these mistakes wouldn't be made again? I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent.
The 5 of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.
Welcome back to the press preview. Kevin Maguire and Annabelle Denham still taking us through their choice from the papers. We'll go to the front of The Guardian now, Kevin, and this is, again, it's the cost of living crisis, it's students, it's COVID, And it's all coming together. And the housing crisis as well, I presume, in one story.
Yeah, absolutely. And in England now, it looks like 34% of students will do their degrees at a local university and live at home, compared to 20% before the pandemic. And it's financially driven. These studies by University College of London and the Sutton Trust, a very good educational charity. And it points out that kids from the more disadvantaged backgrounds are more likely to stay at home because they won't have the financial support. Their parents won't be able to afford to pay their rent and subsidise them if they go away. And I think so they will miss out on opportunities, because if you go to university and you go away from home, I think mixing with other people and going to a new place is a large part of your learning.
That said, you know, my dad, my mum, both went to the University of Glasgow whilst living in Glasgow, and both did rather well.
Interesting. There's a different tradition in Scotland, isn't there? I think there's been more of a tradition of going to your local university in Scotland.
And in Europe, I think more than a third of students live with their parents while they're studying. And it's not just you know, I feel sadness reading this story for a number of reasons, but one of them is, you know, it's the independence, but it's also the fact that children from disadvantaged families may not be able to go to better universities where the courses might be more attractive, where it could lead to them having more sort of valuable careers you know, prosperous and lifetime earnings and all these sorts of things that could be affected by the decisions that they make when they're 17 or 18. You know, my hope is that this is a survey at this stage, so, you know, perhaps we've got some stated versus revealed preferences. You may find that come September, more than...
The House of Commons library figures, which the SNP asked for, I saw Sky reported them, showed that the average student debt after 3 years in England is 45,000. In Scotland, it was a third of that, 15,000, because, of course, you don't pay fees in
and you've got living at home as well,
yeah. So that 45,000, you could see, if you're from a low-income family, you're going to be frightened by that amount of debt. And I know you don't start repaying it until you earn over 20,000 and that.
But it's enough to put you off.
Yeah, and the interest rates are enormous now. It's RPI plus whatever percent it is.
No, it's a huge amount of money. And, of course, it's coming at a time when the Tories are questioning whether we do need half of young people going to university. The value, of course, is Rishi Sunak writing a few weeks ago about Mickey Mouse degrees. And perhaps this is going to force more...
That's Rishi Sunak, who went to a lot of universities, and I've no doubt he'll have his own kids go to university.
Yeah, I do want to squeeze in one last story, though. Page 3 of the Metro, it's all involving Prince Harry and the internet. Not his browser history, but instead that he's been removed from the royal website. A little bit.
Yes, he has, exactly. So HRH has now been removed from the royal family's official website. It's just another blow, isn't it, to Prince Harry? He's had the humiliation of the Spotify deal falling through, a lot of eyebrows raised over that Netflix deal that they seem to have just secured. There are all sorts of rumours swirling about him and Meghan over in California. And, you know, one has to wonder what the future is for Prince Harry. Professionally, that is, because he's surely aired all of his dirty laundry now. He had his book, which I think is falling down the book charts now. They've done the Netflix series. You know, what else are they possibly able to squeeze out of...
As a Republican, I would like to thank him for everything he's done for the royal family.
Come on, you must have some residual sympathy for the way in which Harry and Meghan were treated by aspects of the press in this country.
Oh, yeah, and their own family, yeah. I mean, I don't think they behave particularly well at times themselves. I think if you get on a private jet and being an eco-warrior, I can see a contradiction there. That may be...
Possibly, just a wee one, yeah.
I would have quite liked him to renounce the Prince title as well. Don't call me Prince, and I won't be a Duke either. And good luck to him, then. They can make their way and have a nice new life.
Well, let us see what comes next for Harry and Meghan. I'm sure it will be reported in full across every single one of the papers in this country. Kevin, Annabelle, thank you so much. And indeed, they will be back with us to take us through the big stories in the 11 o'clock hour. But before that, let's have a look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
And the next day will be warmer and drier than recently, but Atlantic rain will be bringing some cooler conditions for the weekend, I'm afraid. Mostly fine at first tomorrow, a few mist and fog patches around, and it will be rather murky for parts of Ireland and western Britain. The morning bringing good sunny spells to most. It will be warmer than recently, with 27 degrees Celsius likely in the southeast. Ireland, southwest Britain, seeing strong winds and outbreaks of rain spreading from the southwest later.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Stick with us, plenty coming up on Sky News at 11 o'clock. We will have the very latest from Northern Ireland, where there are growing safety fears after every police officer had their details compromised in a huge data breach. That's next.